to use your brain, and we started using our brains. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, listen, the only way there could be meaning in life is if there was a creator who had a purpose. Is there a creator or not? So we started going through the logic. We were using Aristotelian logic, but I think in more contemporary or practical terms. Aristotle is the one who pointed out that finiteness and infinity are mutually exclusive. Infinity is a state of being without definition. Part of definition is time. Infinity is beyond time. Finiteness is a different quality of existence. Everything finite is defined, and defined in all ways. Finiteness cannot explain its having come about. Because if there was nothingness, nowhere, never, then pop. Where, when did finiteness come to be? If there's no existence, then how does finiteness come to exist? Now, the alternative is the infinity. Infinity is the most logical form of existence. Form is a funny word, but meaning for existence to exist, existence could not have a beginning. And the only thing that needs no beginning is the infinity. Which means that logically speaking, if existence is to exist, existence must be the infinity. It has no beginning. It's just a state of being. The problem Aristotle raised then was, fine, so we established that in order for existence to exist, there must be the infinity. So where's the finite? Inside the infinity? No. The infinity has no parts. Outside the infinity? That doesn't work either. Infinity doesn't have an outside. Like, how could there be outside the infinity? That was Aristotle's dilemma. So before we go to the Jewish definition, the Torah's definition of the relationship between the finite and the infinity, I just want to make sure that you all got this issue straight. Again, we did not make this up. Aristotle, way back when, raised the issue. Yeah.
Did Aristotle have a theory on like what connected the finite and the infinite?
So Aristotle and basically the Greek philosophers basically came to the conclusion that finiteness must really begin with a semi-finite state. Meaning that finiteness must include some form of infinity, which is counterintuitive. It doesn't really work logically. But considering the fact that this question is unanswerable, they saw that as a viable answer. In other words, finiteness always was. How could that be? Because initially it was not as finite as it is. It had its origins are, it's the infinity became more and more finite. You know, that is the Greek answer. And the way it's brought in the Jewish sources is olam kadmon, which means the earth always existed. Except not in the form that we know it. It had a less finite form initially.
Oh, why is it a problem to have the finite to be infinite?
Because infinity, by definition, has no definition, has no parts. It just is. Once you start placing something inside it, then it's not the infinity. Infinity is without definition. no size, no dimension, no time.
As soon as you give a dimension to it.
Then it's not infinity.
But isn't that what we're doing by saying the infinite is turning into the finite?
So that's what the Greeks did. In other words, what the Greeks were expressing was the fact that finiteness is a non-starter, logically. The infinity is, but even once you establish the infinity, that doesn't explain the finite. So it must be that the finite really began with the infinity, and it was always there, but in a less finite form, and took on more and more finiteness.
Why couldn't it always have just been like finite? Why does it have to be infinite?
Because everything finite must have a beginning. It must have a beginning. Why does it have to have a beginning? Because if it has no beginning, it isn't. It was always here, then you're telling me that always happened already, and always didn't happen already.
What about in math? You have like an infinite number line, you can have like a finite point on the
We talked about this. There's no such thing as a number line. The number line doesn't exist. Because that means it had to begin at minus infinity and end at plus infinity. That means it's already complete and never ending. How's that possible? Never ending means it will never come to an end, so it's never complete.
When you mentioned that the Greeks believed that the infinite gradually became finite, that means at some point infinite became finite. So what's the
What they believed was that there's this semi-finite state that all that all finiteness began.
and what is that?
They named it. I mean, the way it's Nachmanides quotes the Greeks and calls it the Hiyuli.
So it's part infinite, part finite.
Yeah. Even though, like, logically we don't understand because they are mutualisms.
Yeah.
When you were mentioning that in Jewish belief we believe that the earth always existed, but it was a different form and it became more finite.
No.
No.
I didn't give the Jewish answer yet. I did not yet present the Jewish answer.
What's the problem with there being a beginning? As in,
Once it, what began? What began? Like the infinity itself is just the state of being. There's no beginnings there.
like a finite presentation.
Yeah, so where did this begin? Inside the infinity? That means there's some place inside the infinity that it began. Infinity is without any definition. In fact, the word infinity means without definition.
Could you say that as infinity is happening, something began at a point in infinity?
But then there's no such thing as a point in infinity.
Because it's still like,
The infinity is without definition, so there are no points in it.
There's such a thing
But you created a
relative to the
point.
ends of the points of infinity, right? Like you're talking about like relative to the infinity. Like
Is this part of the infinity or is this outside the infinity?
what would you
be part of the infinity, right?
But there are no parts to the infinity. There cannot be a finite part to the infinity because the infinity is a different state of being. It's a state of being that is without definition anywhere.
But there's like there's like a thought experiment, right? That like let's say if you have like a distance from here to here, and each step you take forward, you go half of the remaining distance between you and the
You
end.
can go on doing that endlessly, but you will never reach the end of infinity.
It's still bound within like a finite set.
But there is no infinity.
Last class he said
You can predict that that you can keep doing it and it will never end. But you never did that yet. You will never ever come to a point where you can say, I just divided it into an infinite number of seconds. You can't say that. Right? You can never arrive at the point of infinity.
is time infinite?
What?
Is time infinite?
Well, I mean, what do you mean?
Like, well, if like time.
Your question is, does an infinite amount of time exist? No.
No. Okay.
No. You could say that time will never end.
But it started somewhere.
It started somewhere, and at any given point, it's only there and not any further.
Until we keep moving.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like.
Will it ever end? We don't know.
Is that like being present through pseudo-infiniteness?
So, I just presented what the Greeks said. I mean, just to be fair. In other words, the Greeks agreed that what they were dealing with something that was counterintuitive, meaning against our logic, except that it seemed to be the only way of answering the dilemma. Finite existence on its own is a non-starter. Everything finite must have a beginning. If there was nothingness, nowhere, never, what happened? Where did it happen? When did it happen? There was no time. There was no place. There was what's this about? The alternative is that existence is infinity. Once it's infinity, so we still have the problem. Infinity is without any dimension whatsoever, without any definition whatsoever. So still, how does that explain the finite existence? Where is that? Inside the infinity, no such thing. Outside the infinity, then we're back to the drawing board. But it's not in the infinity, so where did it begin?
What did the Jews say?
So you ready? You understand the problem?
One last thing is that, like, we do see in math that you can have an infinite number of points within a finite space, right? Like,
You cannot have an infinite number of points. You cannot have an infinite number of anything.
between like 0 and 1.
You can't have an infinite number of anything. What you mean when you say infinite is no predictable end, but you haven't reached it yet. To say that something, an infinite collection of finiteness already exists, cannot be, because that means it stopped somewhere. If it's complete, it stopped somewhere.
But you can keep going down like the line.
You can. It has no predictable end, but you never got there. You can't say that I already arrived at an infinite number of points.
Are you not able to say like something has an unpredictable middle but has a beginning and an end?
On the number line, therefore, how could it be?
I mean, you can turn the number line around if you want to,
You can't write
Well,
that. So if there's a,
but it still doesn't explain the origins of finiteness.
It's not really infinity. That makes a lot more sense.
The distance between 2 points is very finite. You know, you can endlessly cut it into equal segments.
Last class you mentioned like if you can arrive at a point on the number line, therefore it can't be infinite because then there's a point.
There's always a
So
point.
There's always a point.
And
within
you
that.
tell me, unless you reach the end of it, in which case it's not infinite. If you didn't reach the end of it, then it doesn't exist. Yeah, you know, I mentioned the same thing, semi-finite. Mentioned that drawing a line on the board and the teacher told you that it had only one dimension. You know, that was theoretical. Because we are theorizing that a line has only one dimension, but anything that has only one dimension doesn't exist because it has no area. You know?
Can the infinite be within the finite?
How's that?
It's the power source, like the
Oh,
soul.
1 second. You're getting very religious, but not logical. Right? The logic doesn't work. The problem is that the logic doesn't work.
Well, just because we can't understand it doesn't mean that's not logical.
Well, so what you're really saying is that we will not find a logical answer.
Or we haven't.
So let me rephrase that in the way Judaism puts it, okay? Judaism says the only rational existence is the infinity. And that must be reality. We actually give it a name. We call the infinity God. But that is the only rational existence. But we experience finiteness, which is undeniable. But it's illogical. So we have a religious name for that. We call that miracle.
Can you repeat that again?
From the beginning?
No, it's like just what you said.
From the
Yeah.
finite?
Yeah, the finite.
Finite existence is undeniable because we experience it. I mean, everything we live with has definition. Even our thoughts have definition. Our imagination. You can't imagine something without definition. Every concept has definition. It's this concept, not something else. Finite existence is undeniable, but it's totally illogical. So again, we use a religious word for describing that which is undeniable but illogical. We call it miracle. This is in terms of logic. There was then the Kabbalah, which is so secret. And one of the deepest aspects of the Kabbalah is creation. Maaseh Bereshit, creation. Which it says, you only give over to someone who can figure it out on his own once you throw him a couple of hints, and certainly not teach it publicly. Yet today, it's all over the place. And I'll share with you what the good books say. How am I allowed to tell you? And the answer is that there's a higher logic than our logic. It is not expressible in our vocabulary, which is based on our logic. It is only expressed by metaphor. And this is very important, because today, over-the-counter Kabbalah is rampant. You can just buy the books. Everything's been translated already. The stuff that few people really would dare read today is available in paperback in practically every spoken language. But what people don't realize is that they are reading metaphors. They are reading metaphors. What it really means, we get something of an idea, but it is beyond our logic. There are very few individuals over the course of history that have understood what it really meant. So I'm going to share with you what the good books say, the Kabbalistic books. But don't for a second take it literal. So you got to hear how it's phrased. At a point in time that the infinity so decided, at the very center of the infinity, it created a void. It contracted. Now let's review this sentence. At a certain point in time, in the infinity, there's no time. When the infinity so decided, the infinity decides. Deciding is something that has to happen within time as well. Before then you didn't decide, and afterwards you did. A decision is a change. At the very center of the infinity, what is that? There's no center to the infinity. A center is only possible when you take the end on this side, the end on this side, and you measure to find the center. When it's never ending, how can there be a center?
Anywhere within that become the center once you.
So, I mean, but that's not what it says. It says at at the centermost point of the infinity.
Once an infinity made that void, then that became the center.
No, it made that void in the center. I'm gonna have to work backwards.
So kind of.
Uh-oh. But it contracted and created a void, and then shined into that void one ray of infinite light. And that almost filled the void, but not quite. And it developed layers, concentric circles, and a column. Within that column, there were also concentric circles. And that infinite light created or formed containers to contain the light. But the light was too powerful, so the containers broke. Until the light was partially diminished. And it formed what we call sphirot, that themselves formed different spheres of existence, which we call the different worlds, all the way down to the lowest world, which is our world. That, in a nutshell, is the secret of creation in the works of the Kabbalah. Okay, are you now enlightened? There are people that don't take this literally, but they miss the point. A, it's totally illogical. B, if this is the big deal, so why was it kept secret? Why is it such a big secret? This is all metaphor. What can we gather from it that our minds can understand? That this miracle or illogical creation of the finite took place within and without of the finite at the same time. The idea of a void within the infinity means it's within but without. We can't understand it, but at least we understand the direction it's pushing in. But more than that, the finite is not the infinity, but it is made of the infinite light, which is made of the infinity stuff. The stuff it's made of is all the infinity stuff, because there's no other stuff to be made of. Which means that on a certain level, all that exists is the infinity. And even the finite is really made of the infinity stuff. But it's finite. But it's not as finite as we think it is. Now, I just want to point out to you that science has been gradually moving in that direction. Now let me explain. What is this table made of? Or what's the glass on top of it made of? It's hard, right?
Sand.
Silicon.
Children.
Do you know what most of this is?
Atoms.
Empty space. What are we feeling? Are we feeling the matter? What are we really feeling? So why does space feel this hard? It's the energy we're feeling. And what's the energy made of? Science is going, what's at the very bottom of it all? Where science is up to today is that ultimately there is no real hard stuff that anything's made of. Ultimately, it's like information, sort of like bytes that are on or off. The truth of the matter is that from a scientific perspective, finiteness is not what it appears to be. Ultimately, everything is made of the infinity stuff. It just took on that which appears to have form and it's undeniable. But it's not what we think it is. Now, this table is not infinity. This table is not infinite. It's wood with glass. But ultimately, made of molecules and then atoms and subatomic particles going further and further and further, and ultimately, matter itself is a bunch of forces that have some kind of definition that we're trying to figure out. So the moral of the story is, the infinity is the infinity. Real existence, logical existence is the infinity. Rambam writes that when the verse says Hashem Elokim Emet, Hashem is true, it doesn't mean Hashem is true, it means Hashem is truth. There is no true existence like the infinity. Rational, logical existence is only the infinity. The finite is miraculous and is not what we think it is. It's something that's within and without and made of, but not. And these are secrets to really understand it. You've got to have the head of the Vilna Gaon. But again, the only true rational existence is the infinity, which we call God. The finite is miraculous, illogical, and beyond our ability to fully comprehend, and it certainly is not what we think it is. Again, science backs that up 100%. I'm going to leave you with that. Hope you don't have nightmares. But, think about it.
Thank you.